Welcome to another live stream appointment of today's Communicators. I'm your host, Kris Reichert. We're multi-streaming right now to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and also to LinkedIn. So I'd like to say hello to anybody who is joining the live stream right now. I am super excited about today's discussion. I have with me in the broadcast studios, he is an award-winning investigative journalist based in the UK. He is also a correspondent for Mediaset here in Italy, where I also reside. And he is a BBC political commentator. Let me please welcome Federico Gatti. Hello.
Hi, Kris. So happy to be here with you today.
I am bursting with excitement to have you here today. You are such a busy man. I mean, we had scheduled 2 days ago to do this live stream, but you had to cut out because they called you to report a suspicious package that was left under the London Bridge. How did that go down?
Fortunately, it wasn't anything serious. It was an hectic day. It was the 29th birthday of the Queen. There was the Super League thing going on. And I managed to find half an hour for you. But when my editor called me up and said you should rush to London Bridge to see the package and what's going on, I had to postpone, and I'm sorry, but I'm here today for you all the time you want.
I am just so happy. Maybe it's better that way. That way, if we get into some interesting conversations, we can even, keep talking for 5 minutes extra today, because I want to ask you so many different things. Now, I didn't realize that, when I found out that you did investigative journalism, that meant that you were undercover. So what kind of situations did you find yourself in? Anything, I don't know.
So I was working for a place called the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, and it was a very high profile position and office. And we were dealing with fashion in Italy. And so how the fashion industry is affected by illegal Chinese workforce. And so we wanted to prove that if you buy any luxury goods in Europe, basically, chances are that 90% of the work, the actual putting together of a shoe or a belt or especially bags, it's made by cheap labor, mainly in Italy, So without going too much into details of companies, let me say that it's a widespread phenomenon. And the way we wanted to show and prove it was to pretend that we were actual investors into this business. So I had a colleague of mine, Asian, and she was pretending to be the daughter of this multimillionaire Hong Kong-based entrepreneur, and I was the facilitator. So we had to have like fake websites, fake business cards, and I was the one wearing a undercover camera.
Wow.
So we had to spend quite a lot of time in Italy in certain areas where this phenomenon was mostly relevant and present. And we had to meet people and film people and get into these spaces where you could find families with kids working non-stop in warehouses with poor hygienic situations and all.
Oh, man.
And funnily enough, we even had to involve a fashion college in London to ask a couple of students to produce like a sketchbook that were similar to the companies we were targeting with our investigations, in order to prove that we had done our homeworks. So we went to these, Chinese communities, through restaurants, through shops, through people we knew, and we had to say, I want to do this bag, which was very similar to a bag that we were investigating, a company that we were investigating. And so it's been quite a, exciting, dangerous, but hard-hitting work we've been making. And so, that was my baptism of fire in the journalism field here in London, because I was just starting an internship after a master at City University, and the rest is history.
That's really impressive. I mean, you really thought of everything. What a complete job. It seems almost like a film. You see so many movies like this where you go undercover and you have to have all of the fake websites and have everything prepared just in case so that you've got that credibility. But it must have been so gratifying doing that, knowing that you were somehow helping make a difference and exposing the truth and bringing justice to a situation. So, wow, congratulations for that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's exactly what journalism should be all about, really, changing the world a little bit at a time. And the problem is nowadays, mainstream media are not really focused on that, and they tend to stay on the surface of the story. Mainly because of the budget. If you have to do an investigation, like I've done a 18 months long investigation on mafia.
Wow. That is dangerous. Holy.
Yeah, I had to go many times to Catanzaro, to Trapani, to Palermo, to Reggio Calabria, and all. And you need budget for that. You need to have 3 people working on a story for 1 year or more, without even having a single article published. So if you are a publisher and there is a market to deal with, you really have to have the spalle larghe, we say in Italy. The
wide shoulders, you have to be tough about it.
So that's why real investigative journalism is very difficult to find, but nevertheless is out there, and I respect this field very much.
Absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about the differences between, what we find is a lot of forms of journalism, but through social media, which isn't necessarily official, let's say, because even this, for example, is a live stream. It's going to all of my social media channels, but it's not like having that institutional role as a journalist. So tell me a little bit about the differences, based on all of these years of experience that you've had between journalism and social media.
Well, nowadays, the accessibility to information is everywhere. It's very easy. Yeah. So I see it as people should follow certain journalists because they rely on them, or certain networks because they rely on them, and they know that they verify the information. They prefer to get the right information instead of giving first the wrong information to beat the other competitors. And I would say that instead of being a process from top to bottom, now is the other way around, where people actively look for information and look for places where to gather information from. The problem is that now it's not vertical, but it's more horizontal. And you have a lot of places where there are echo chambers that you must be really careful to touch, because we see social media full of fake news. Yeah. Now, if I have some background, I can, with my critical judgment, separate real news and fake news. But take my mother, she's 70 plus, and she's fed on WhatsApp or other social media or Facebook with this fake news that she cannot really have the time to double check. So it's a very wild game right now that became also dangerous because there were political involvements, and we saw with Donald Trump in America, with the assault to the Campidoglio, what happened, and things like this. So I would say that right now it's not an easy life for journalists, because people tend not to rely on you anymore or trust the mainstream media any longer, because they have access to more easy news, which are false. So I think that a kind of a lot of job must be done by probably the news publishers themselves to gather the trust of the readers. But unfortunately, there is a market out there. So we see a lot of newspapers clickbaiting. putting
Clickbait,
out,
yes.
yeah. So when they give you half of the story and they assume that the story is one, but then you read the article and it's not right there.
Yeah.
And so this affects the trust of the public. This affects the whole category of journalists. So it's not an easy day and an easy time for
Yeah.
us. But I assume that soon we will start to see some changes because of the conscious shift of the people. Imagine like I don't know, the theme of climate change. 5 years ago, nobody was talking about, very few journalists were assessing this problem, and nowadays it's becoming a movement from each one of us to look for these things. And so where is the demand? There is the supply.
Yeah.
And so it's a game that is going like this. Unfortunately, especially some social media platform in the past few years, they didn't vet the news that they were spreading on their spaces. And, there was a scandal at Facebook and Twitter as well. And so we had to wait a little bit to find a balance between these two things, the freedom of choice and the responsibility from the people who host those fake news. I would say that it's a balance that we are almost there, but not yet. And that's why it's crucial that all the journalists are trusted and they do their job in a very ethical way, which is check your sources, check the news, verify it, and when you're sure that it's a real news, get it out there.
Right. There's so many touch points here, Federico, that I want to ask you about, because you talk about easy accessibility. In fact, we have access to everything out there, but unfortunately, we also are prey to analytics. And analytics pick up on what we're interested in looking at. And then before you know it, we're being fed everything that maybe was one day curious to us. We're being fed it without even asking for it. And then we can't differentiate between what is fake and what isn't, because we don't have the experience that a person like you does. So how can we, what are the methods that we can use to actually be able to see what's fake to us and what isn't, what's being thrown at us and that's been artificially generated, and what's being corruptedly utilized in order to bring to online followings. And it's so difficult for the regular common viewer these days to really know what's real and what's not. So what would you suggest?
It depends, Kris. It depends. But yeah, you got the point. You got the fact that it's so easy to be manipulated nowadays that you should put more effort into checking the news itself, at least by reading the article before sharing it. It's so easy.
Right.
People share articles they don't even read because they are hit by the title, and maybe it's a title that it's clickbaiting. So they just want to be viral without being true.
And it's just shock value. Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, let's add, sorry if I interrupted you, but the conspiracy theories. I mean, recently I've found out that there are specific agencies in certain countries that are being given lots of money to create these conspiracy theory videos, because there's such a market for that, because people are being fed. And the more you're interested and the more it seems something curious one day because of maybe a title, and then because it creates a bit of doubt as far as what we're being told. Is it right? Is it wrong? And then before you know it, you're thinking that they're all out to get us, and then you're being fed more and more and more of that. And so you just go deeper and deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole. And before you know it, you're terrified to walk out your front door. So it's really tough to create those kind of those boundaries, and to understand, okay, this is a bit much. I need to have a head on my shoulders, and I need to be able to approach this level-headedly. So again, sorry for interrupting you. You were probably giving good advice as to what to do to avoid this happening.
Okay, simple things can be: check the source. If it's a weird sounding website that you never heard of, probably is rubbish. Second, read the article and try to understand if it's reliable or not. if they say someone told us that really you want to have official lines, you want to have, and third, data. If there is a number, if there is a study, if there is the source of this, let's say, study on coronavirus or whatever, check that they mention a real university, not like the university of I don't know what. And you check and you see that university I don't know what doesn't exist. So it's a fake article. Yeah. But especially, there is a personal approach that can be healthy in your understanding of the world, and you have to do your homeworks in the same way that you live. You don't trust strangers who is drunk, and you trust your friend who is your neighbor and has a family. It's the same kind of critical approach. So there is a personal movement, the personal approach, but also a structural change must happen. And I believe that social media should be held accountable for the content that they host. And we saw, okay, this is the big elephant in the room. We're talking about mainly Facebook, okay? So I believe that Facebook should be held accountable for the fake news website that it hosts. And we saw recently that Mark Zuckerberg went hard on fake news and closed up some accounts and is making things less easy for people who want to share fake news to do so. But there is still a lot of work to be done, especially because the politicians are using that to affect the democratic process. So it's not just the fake news that my mom gets from her WhatsApp group. It's a democratic process, and it's at the end affecting freedom of the entire planet, because we saw the Arab Spring, we saw the assault on the Capitol Hill, we saw a lot of things happening in Europe and in the world, which are down to this very topic, which is fake news on social media.
And it's strategized. It's not even something that randomly happens. There's literally a strategy behind it. So, these are really interesting topics.
Think about Cambridge Analytica, the scandal that was, perpetrated in London with people getting your personal data and sold your personal data through social media platforms for political purposes. And we had a big scandal here in London because of that. And that affected the Brexit process. It affected the rise of populist parties across Europe. It affected the Trump campaign in 2016. So we're dealing with something that it's not really virtual any longer,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But moving on to maybe more brighter days. I always, as a young girl, I dreamt of being a journalist. I wanted to be a news broadcaster. That was my dream. And in the basement of this townhouse that we had, there was this hole in the wall in this wooden structure where we were supposed to put a television that we never ended up putting a TV there. But I used to climb behind this hole in the wall, and I used to pretend I was a news broadcaster. And so I would invite friends and family and I would report the news going on in the neighborhood or, what was happening in the family. And I loved it. And before I left for Europe, I was actually accepted into 3 journalism universities with high honors. So that was my absolute road I was going to take. And then I ended up taking a 1-year sabbatical and coming to Europe and traveling around. And I never ended up getting back to Canada and going to university for journalism. So, I ended up getting into MTV and then, a television presenting and then a radio host, which in a different kind of a way, it was music journalism, right? But nowadays, I really have come to terms with the fact that I don't think I would have been good. You know why? I'm too sensitive. Like, Federico, I can't watch something going on in the news and not be heavily affected. I find that I can't create that shield that protects me from just bursting into tears when I find or I hear of something bad happening. I can't watch the news. And I wonder, what has it been like for you? I mean, you must have had to cover some I don't know if you've ever done cronica nera, which is the really bad news that happens, but how do you manage? And do you not ever kind of bring that home with you and say, "Ooh, what if this was happening to my family or to me or to whatever?" Once I became a mom, I became hypersensitive to this stuff. So, what's your process? How do you get through that?
I laugh because it's a very personal question, and I thank you for that. But doing a step backwards, I think you are already, once you're a journalist, you're always a journalist. Journalism is a state of mind, okay? And you were so lucky to merge your attitude, like the inquisitive mind of asking questions and find the truth and gather more information about a story that you like, and your passion, which is music and entertainment. And so you should feel blessed for this, even if you never went back to Canada to finish that course. Well, yes, I've been pretty much on a regular basis dealing with dark stories like terrorist attacks. I went to the Middle East 5 times. I went under the bombs of the Israeli army. I watched a house burn with so many people dying, including 2 Italian guys in West London. I've witnessed terrorist attacks. And I'm a very sensible person. So the struggle was double for me to overcome my emotions and be professional. But once you take on the responsibility of telling the story, it's as if you are called by a higher spirit not to be let down for the story, but hold on to the responsibility, which was as important as the fact itself, as the story itself. So you were like taking the story, bringing it with you, but hiring to something higher, which was the responsibility to share it in a professional way. And that was the thing that gave me the strength not to cry in front of the camera while I was doing what I was doing. Just a sense of responsibility. Be professional. Be professional. So that was my process, but it wasn't a painful process because we all know that journalists tend to have post-traumatic stress disorders. They drink heavily. They have to wind down afterwards. So there is a personal thing that is affected. But overall, I see the world as a sad and beautiful place. And we all suffer, and it's not that if you don't see bad things, those things don't happen. And it's not if you're not a journalist, you will never see sad things. So it's a part of life. It's just giving more intensity in a short period of time. But then, you at the end of the day, it's life, and so you stick with your job, you stick with your responsibility, you stick with the truth, you give honor to the truth, you give honor to the people affected, so it's a very, almost a religious process. It's not like 3 people died, that's the story. No, you want to give a sense of sacred aspect on that. So
absolutely, you think of the end result. You think of what you're doing, what you're giving, what you're reporting, and you think of the good you're doing as an effect of that reporting. In my small experience, I mean, one time, what I did is I put together a web series called Save the Animals because I have a huge passion for animals and their well-being. And so one time I went kind of undercover, not really undercover, but I went to this thing called the MIFOR, which is this big Fiera di Pellicce, like a fur fair here in Milan. And I went there and I was able to get in the doors with my crew, with the camera crew and everything, pretending that I was doing a story on fashion. And I was like, great. Oh, what are the latest trends at the fur fair? Oh, wonderful. And I managed to squeeze in an interview with the president of the fur fair. And I asked these questions, and I was able to squeeze into one of the big fashion shows. And they put me right next to this expert. And they let me interview her because they said, Kris is here to do this story on fashion. So I interviewed her. And the same thing, I kind of felt like I wanted to strangle her because of the things she was telling me, oh, this is a rare lynx and we get the rare lynxes. And I'm thinking, a rare lynx? And we only take away the central part of the, where the fur is the softest. And then we, they skin them alive, all of these things. And she's telling me this and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like, but I kept true to what my purpose was. And that was get the story out there, get people aware of what's going on, and make them understand what happens, and therefore maybe bring down this the selling of fur in the world, because so many people are unaware, and then it's hidden in the fur collars and little accessories. Sorry to go off track, but it just brought to mind. In fact, I didn't sit there and cry and think, oh, the poor lynx. I actually had the purpose in mind, and that was in my little small bit of experience.
Exactly. You're spot on. You had exactly the right approach, and the approach that should be held by all the journalists, which is like doing a step back as a human being, as a personal, and a step forward as a divulgator, you say in English, someone who spread the actual word, which is way more important in the global impact than your emotion in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings me to my next question. Now, Federico, journalists have a huge responsibility, as you said, and they have a huge gift, this possibility to really bring the news to the world and to bring it as they can transmit, a part of themselves as well, because it's not always just what you're reporting, but it's how you're reporting it. What sensitivities you're giving as you speak, what connection you're making with your audience. And so do you believe that journalists do have the capability to change the world if they wanted to? Before you go live, do you feel sometimes, have you ever felt in certain moments like, I am doing something great right now?
Yeah. Yes. However, with the everyday news, it's less so. Mm-hmm. But I try to do it in a way, even the 95th birthday of the Queen last week, okay? So you can say the Queen is turning 95, but she's sad because her husband passed away, whatever. Or you can say it's a very delicate and sad birthday for her, and her suffering is shared by millions of people around the world during a pandemic time. So you create a link, an emotional link, with the people that listen to you, to the story, and they don't think about, she's the Queen and she's sad, but they feel like this is something that I can relate to. So when you can create that link, even with the most stupid and silly news that can be, ignored in your everyday life to people that listen to you, and that's a way to give more awareness to people, do your job in a kind way, and ultimately change the world a little bit. And that's only the news part. When you do investigative journalism or hard-hitting news, that's when after one article, the minister resigns. And that's an even bigger impact. So yes, journalism should make the world better. Unfortunately, it's not always the case, because even journalism have some dynamics in terms of market and money and finance that are controlled by people who not always aim for the greater good. So that's why right now, but in the past few years, there was very big growth of independent journalism and independent realities, crowdfunded and independent in their approach. And so, yes, journalism should change the world. Yes, journalists should feel the mission, but it's not always the case. But nobody's perfect. But yes, I believe that I'm doing a service rather than a job.
Right. Exactly. It's like the ripple effect.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Little bit, but it spreads to the world.
And eventually, you want to do, everyone's life should be, I'm doing something good for my inner circle, and then the greater people, they have a bigger circle,
Yeah.
So even if you're the local news, you can do good to your local community. If you are the national newscaster, you speak to millions of people, and you have an impact to a larger audience, but the principle is the same.
Excellent. Wow, Federico, last thing, just do you have a pep talk that you give yourself? Do you ever have a ritual or something that you do before you go live, or something that you say, or, a piece of gratitude or something like that? Do you have something like that?
I should. It changes every day because, sometimes I don't have time to sleep enough. So I drive my motorbike to the office or to the crew, and I put, heavy metal in my ears, and I charge myself with the music, or sometimes I'm too stressed because I'm doing 4 news beats a day, 4 news packages a day, always on call, last minute, rushing, and I need to calm down. So I do 3 deep breaths. And that puts me in the right mood. But yeah, it's like doing acting, You cannot go sloppy on the stage. you must and then my mom sees me on TV, she has her own network of friends from the supermarket, from the church, and they all watch me, And so if I'm like this, the following day she will call me yeah, the girl from the supermarket, she saw you a bit tired. Are you eating? Are you eating?
And where's your mom? She's in Italy, where?
In Milan.
Oh, she's in Milan. Okay.
Yeah.
That's so nice. It's so nice that you can have your parents follow what you do while you're over there in the UK. I've always been so away from my family. And when I was starting on MTV, and for most of my years working in television, it was before the era of social media. So it wasn't necessarily where they could turn on the TV and see what I was doing. Now my mom can join my live streams. She often watches my Instagram lives. She really gets a kick out of it. But before then, it was always just me. Either I tell them all about it on the phone and I sound like a total egomaniac, or they just don't really know what I do, kind of thing. And that's mostly what it was all about. But Federico, this has been so inspirational talking to you. I have had goosebumps during this conversation. You are such a fascinating human being, and I'm so fortunate to have met you. We met, actually, I didn't mention it earlier, but in the Mediaset studios doing Mattino Cinque with Federica Panicucci. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. We were doing a joke to the Italian public. I was in Milan, and they, in the backstage, set up. Do you remember this fake London background? And And Federica was like, now we go to London. And I was in the backstage with the picture. And she said live, she said something totally unexpected. She was like, yeah, but when are you coming to Milan? And I was like, I'm always busy. And then she said, you're always busy. And she came out of the in the back of the studio, in backstage. She held me with the hands, and she brought me in the studio where there were you and other people, and I sat down. I was like, wow, this is, a big studio, big lights, lots of people. I'm always kind of alone with my cameraman, so having big audience face to face, it was a special moment we met. Yes.
Yeah. And Kris and I were crazy about you. We were like, Federico, he's amazing. And in fact, we maintained contact after that. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share a bit of my person, and I look forward to meeting you next time in Milan or in London. And what's your mom's name?
Carol.
And a big kiss to Carol.
Oh, thank you. She's going to love that. She will love it. All right, Federico, sending a big kiss to you in London. Thank you for everything, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody, for following the live stream. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for another appointment of today's Communicators. Bye for now.
Sure, Kris. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.